I will also send you a recording, a link to the recording on a private YouTube channel that we host, and I'll send you the slides after today's session as well. What we'll do today, I'm going to do a bit of interaction today. I'm going to share some principles with you. Today's all about developing a growth mindset. And I'd love for you to think about this through two lenses or two perspectives. The first is to think about yourself and your own mindset and how you kind of approach your work, relationships, challenges that you face, situations that you find yourself in. So your own mindset, and then start to think about your team or the people that you're working with. So for some of you, team might be more appropriate. For others of you, it might be customers, maybe even patients. But start to think about them. Today's all about mindset and how we develop our own growth mindset, and we develop the growth mindset of the people around us. So we'll talk about that as we go through today's session. And hopefully it creates some thinking space for you today. I really want to give you some time to kind of reflect and think about the concepts and the content for today. I will share my screen with you because this will really help you just to start to think, okay, what evolution might I need to make, what adjustments or refinements might I need to make to what I'm doing at the moment. And I'd like to make it as relevant as possible. So I'll share some examples with you. Then I really want to think about what does this mean for you. Then I'll share some principles about how we can start to develop our own mindset. And then I'm going to open up a few breakout rooms, and we give you a chance just to talk to each other as we do on each of these calls. There's as much value in that as there is in the session content. So we'll give you a chance to do that, and then we'll take some feedback, and then we'll wrap up and close. So we will be done by 2 or shortly before 2 o'clock. So mindset and psychology, kind of the link to high performance, what we can do to start to develop it, and then some simple kind of principles. So I don't know if anybody heard the story of the 2 wolves. Not everybody. Okay, let me tell you the story about the 2 wolves. So there was an Indian elder who was talking around the campfire to his children and grandchildren. And he was talking about the fact that in each of us there lives 2 wolves. Okay, so one of the wolves, the white wolf, is good. It's kind of all the positive things we think of. It's us supporting ourselves, supporting other people, thinking good of other people. It's the progress we make. It's the actions we take. It's the charity that we give. And it really supports and helps us thrive in terms of our outlook in life. He said the challenge is there's the second wolf, and the second wolf is the wolf that creates some self-doubt. Maybe sometimes is quick to chastise. Maybe sometimes is negative or undermines people, or even undermines ourselves. And it can be erosive and actually cause us to see things through a much more negative lens. It can catastrophize. And through that lens, when we look through that wolf's eyes, we tend to limit and restrict ourselves and the people around us. And as he was explaining about these 2 wolves, he kind of paused for a moment. And one of his grandchildren said, I can relate to that, Grandad, and I get, the 2 wolves, but what I'm interested to know is which of the wolves ultimately wins. And the grandfather pauses, says, great question, my son. Whichever one you continue to feed. And it's a really good lesson for all of us, right, about where we focus and where our teams focus, and the impact that has on the way we see the world and the way we interact with people. So our mindset is very much up to us, right? And the fact that you're here today probably tells me that you're already on this journey, but hopefully that's a kind of reminder to you about where we continue to focus strengthens, regardless of whether it's positive or negative. And we'll all meet people who are almost seem like default positive. And we're like, really great to spend time with those people. It energizes you, it makes you feel good about that interaction. But then we've also got people that we spend time with who are completely the opposite. And you think, oh, they struggle to see the positive in any situation. For every opportunity, they'll find a challenge. So we have to remember that part of that is the default behavior that we and other people may find ourselves kind of repeating time and time again. And when we think about mindset, I heard this. There's a great kind of development coach, a guy called Tom Billier, and he talks about the mindset being a bit like, our mindset and us as humans being a bit like fish in water. The fish don't realize they're in water. And a lot of our teams and people that we operate with and work with and have relationships with don't even realize their mindset. And you'll start to, if you're in leadership position, you'll know this already. You'll have noticed you have interactions with people and they have default ways of thinking, and they really struggle to shift it because they don't even realize it's a belief that they hold. So actually getting to grips with that and helping ourselves and people change is not always as straightforward as we think, because the first step to change is awareness. And if someone's not even aware of their mindset, then it's really difficult for them to acknowledge something and start to change it. So mindset's a fascinating topic. I love delving on mindset. Before we go into some principles, I'd love to hear, we won't do this in a breakout. I'll ask you to either do it on the chat. So we found the chat earlier, so hopefully you can go back to the chat. I'd love to hear, when you think about kind of either some of the things that you're doing or some of the team members you're working with, what are some of the behaviors, attitudes that you're dealing with on a regular basis that you find most challenging? It might be customers, might be patients, might be team members, might be people you're collaborating with. But what are some of the behaviors and attitudes that you see that you find the most challenging? Just drop them in the chat, because what's going to be interesting is that as you share those, you're going to find that there's some real commonality here. So what are some of the behaviors and attitudes that you see that you find most challenging? Alan's with us as well. Alan, thank you for joining us. I think I forgot to say hi to you, Alan, but thank you for joining us. Andrew, thanks, Andrew. First off, so negativity, that's good, and evasiveness. Yeah, that's really interesting. So not just the negativity itself, but maybe evading responsibility or evading actions, or always having, an excuse, stroke reason for why something perhaps isn't being done or why change doesn't happen. Yeah, thanks, Andrew. Yeah, negativity and evasiveness, absolutely. Simon, thank you, Simon. A lack of awareness that we trade in a competitive environment. Nice. Yeah. So actually that kind of almost denial, right? Almost a denial of the true environment that you're working in, or your team are having to work in, being as competitive as it is. Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Simon. Kevin, thank you. Kevin says, with customers too busy for new suppliers or new ideas. Yeah. Even when you've got something really compelling, they're too busy to consider it. Yeah. Yeah, I think we can, if any of us are dealing with customers, patients, anybody that we're trying to kind of bring into our business, that's a common challenge. How do we get the customer to go beyond the I'm too busy, I know we're happy doing what we're doing, there's there's no need. Yeah, thanks, Kevin, that's good. Rachel, thank you. As a leader, we have to be constantly positive, otherwise your negativity will bring your team down. Absolutely, that's so true. We are role models for all of our teams. It's more important for us than anybody else, because that spreads. We'll talk about that in a bit. Thank you, Rachel. Yeah, it's good. Mike, immediately saying no to a request before they've spent any time thinking about it. Yeah, your default is no. Default is no. That won't work. No, that's not for me. No, can't see how that would play out. No, absolutely. Yeah, that's it's interesting. I'll talk through some principles in a minute, and you'll start to understand why some of these things come up for our teams, customers, ourselves sometimes, right? Even we may find ourselves, I find myself sometimes thinking, not that again, right? Not that again, and it's actually, sometimes you have to park yourself and go, hold on, look at this through a fresh pair of eyes. Where's the opportunity here? Otherwise we shut stuff down too quickly. So yeah, really important that we manage it for ourselves, especially when we're less consciously aware that we're doing it. Leanne says, thanks, Leanne says, accountability. Yeah, so getting our teams to feel a sense of accountability, to take responsibility for things, to follow up, to do the things they need to do, and to be owners, right? To be owners of their roles, whatever it is that they're doing within our business. Yeah, thanks, Leanne. That's great. Okay, so some really good examples there. Thank you for the challenges. That's great. So you see this play out. A lot of these things, they are linked to belief sets and mindsets of our teams. So a big part of what we have to do is start to reshape and always challenge our teams on some of these beliefs and mindsets that they have. So let's talk about some principles. So with these in mind, okay, with these challenges in mind that you have for your customers, let me share some insights with you about mindset. Oh, hold on. I've got a number of people in our waiting room by the looks of things. So let me just admit them. Sorry, we've got, I think I was so busy talking, I forgot to let other people in. So we've got these challenges. It's kind of the penalty for being late, isn't it? Right? You don't always get in straight away. So thank you to those people joining us. Apologies that I was a bit slow letting you in. I was mid-ramble. So we're talking about mindset today. We're talking about some of the challenges that people on the call are facing. We're talking about what we see as behaviors and attitudes, and this choice around mindset and the impact that it has. And so we'll start to talk about some of the things that we can do to improve our own mindset and encourage our teams to improve their mindset. And once we've done that, I'm going to share some slides with you and some information. Then I'm going to invite you all to go into some breakout rooms. We've got a good sized group today. We've got about 16 of you. So we'll have probably 4 breakout groups just to discuss what changes can you make either for yourself or for your teams when it comes to mindset. So let's talk about the difference between the fixed mindset, which is, this is the way it's always been done around here, right? Things are fixed, and the growth mindset, right? So the growth mindset is anything possible. We may have to just look at things differently. There's always a new way to resolve challenges, obstacles, and actually fixed mindset is getting stuck without realizing you're getting stuck. As I think it was Mike said, people saying no without even really hearing what it is you've suggested, kind of immediately saying no to a request before somebody spent time even thinking about what it was. And that can be a real indicator that someone has a fixed mindset. And one of the reasons this happens, right? So there's some research work being done by the American Institute of Psychology, and they talk about the way the mind works. They've done a lot of experimentation with kind of general public people, the way that they think, surveying and questioning. What they found was that when presented with most situations, what happens to most of us when we go into default, when the mind is on default mode, is that 50% of the time, the mind automatically produces thoughts or responses that are negative. So there's resistance, there's a no, there's a I'm not sure that'll work, or even there's worst case scenario thinking, right? So that's naturally 50% of the time, without some kind of cultivation, without working on it, our minds go to negative thoughts 50% of the time. Okay, so half of the time. Just think about that for your teams. Think about that for yourself. This is default thinking. 20% of the time, we're at neutral. So we're kind of, it might work, it might not work. I'm not so sure, right? I'm not resisting, but I'm at neutral, right? And then just 30% of the time, we default to positive. So accepting of change, open and receptive to new ideas or even opinion. And even we hit a situation and you think about, okay, what could happen in this situation? 50% of the time it goes to negative, 20% neutral, 30% positive. So this starts to explain some of the things that happen for our teams and for us. And the reason this is important is because whatever we decide when we hit any situation determines the way we experience that situation and our own experience in the world, right? So if we allow the default mindset to kind of draw us into negative thinking 50% of the time, we will find that we have a negative experience of the world 50% of the time, negative experience of relationships, negative experience of all sorts of situations. And so really, if we have this, if we don't make some changes for ourselves and our teams, negative mindset, negative experience, and this starts to cascade, negative experience for people spending time with people who are negative, right? Whether that's our customers, other team members, you as a leader within your business, there'll be people in your team where you think, oh, Have I got to spend time with that person? Right. There's a lot of that is about attitude and experiences that are created. But the same is true around positive mindset. Those people who have a positive mindset tend to create positive experiences, not just for themselves, but for everybody around them, right? And these are basic things, but they're really important things that we can start to change once we become aware of them. And of course, we recognize that it's much more easy to influence people when we're in a positive frame of mind. It's much more difficult if we're in a negative frame of mind. And sometimes, if we think about this in the context of customers, patients, people we're dealing with, and I always share a story, I will share this story with you about when I was in a sales management position and I was with one of my sales team. We were in a customer, it was a very large customer in London. It was a hospital we were dealing with. And one of the senior stakeholders, we had a meeting with a senior stakeholder, went into this meeting, and my salesperson had preempted me beforehand. This person's really negative, they're always picking fault. First thing they'll do is roll out a laundry list of problems that we've got with us as a supplier. So, okay, that's fine, we'll deal with it. Went into this meeting and he was absolutely right. The customer just rolled out this list of problems. It was a really, really negative start to the meeting. And then we started to try and talk, he tried to talk this customer around to a more positive conversation. It kind of was going nowhere. So I asked this question, and it was a deliberate question. I paused the meeting. I said, would you mind if I asked you just a different question, a quick question? The customer said, no, not at all. I said, I'm interested. Could you tell me one thing in the last 12 months that you've led in the trust that you're most proud of? And the customer kind of looked at me, genuinely looked at me as if I was kind of asking a question in another language, and said, well, I don't know, I don't understand the question. What do you mean? So I repeated the question. So I'm intrigued. If you think about your work in the trust, the work you're doing, that your team are doing with you, can you think of in the last 12 months, what's the achievement that you've had as a team, you leading your team, that you're most proud of? And the first answer was, there isn't anything. And so I then feigned surprise. What? There's nothing. In the last 12 months, there's nothing you're most proud of. And the customer went, well, no, there must be something. And then kind of rewound their position. Went, oh, actually, there was this. We did this audit. We did this audit of patients with a certain condition, and we've managed to reduce that condition by about 25% just through the audit and training process as a result of that 12-month. I'm like, so you've reduced that condition by 25%, and at this point, that person had completely forgotten they'd done it, because the default mindset was around negative experiences, focusing on problems, focusing on challenges. And sometimes, if you're in a conversation with a customer or a team member, and there's this negative focus, you might have to ask a question that cuts through and almost wakes them up to something positive. Because when we did it in this context with this customer, we then went on to talk about a sales opportunity, but we couldn't have got there without the pattern interrupt to something more positive. Does that make sense to everybody? So sometimes you have to think mindset's so important. If I keep trying to sell to someone with a negative mindset, I'm never going to get there. If I keep trying to engage a team member with a negative mindset, we're never going to get there. We've got to interrupt the pattern, move them from negative to positive, and from there that creates a gateway to do something more opportunistic with them. So something to bear in mind. But a mindset is so important that it kind of almost is everything. So what can we do? Here's some ideas, and then I'm going to ask you to discuss them in your groups. So the first thing is, we talk about awareness. We have to become aware of our thoughts, and we notice positive thoughts, we notice negative thoughts. Notice where your mind goes to on default. Notice where your team go to on default, right? Do they immediately come up with problems rather than solutions? Once you're aware of this, once you can help them to become aware of it, that creates the opportunity to change, right? So once you know where you go to on negative or positive, you can change it or enhance it. The second thing is then to recognize this ability that between anything happening and our team's response to it, there's an opportunity for us to change the response, right? So stimulus and response, between the stimulus and our response, there's a gap. And our job is to start to broaden that gap and start to direct our focus and our thoughts towards positive outcomes, or what we want from that interaction, rather than what we don't want. And that switch is really important. So rather than focus on obstacle or challenge, start to focus on, okay, what's the positive outcome we want here? Start to direct yourself, start to direct your team, so that becomes the kind of default thinking rather than the default to resistance or the barrier. And then thirdly, one of the things that's really interesting, once you start to direct your focus and your thoughts, you'll notice that everyone has this inner voice. There's like this inner commentary that we all have that just talks in the background. And once you notice that voice, you'll all be aware of it, right? Recognizing that isn't a voice that has to run on autopilot. That's a voice that you can start to interrupt and control. So the next step then, once you've become aware of that inner voice, is to start to change it. So in psychology, they call that inner voice the inner critic. It's actually called the inner critic, believe it or not. And what we want to do, and what is the successful route to change that inner critic, is to move it from critic to coach. And what that means is, rather than talking to yourself, if it's you, your team members, if it's them, rather than talking to yourself in a negative way, start to use that inner voice to ask you better questions, to start to empower you and make you feel like there's a sense of control and positivity in any given situation, right? And then once you start to work on directing your thoughts and focus, improving that inner critic to become your inner coach. It's really interesting how simple and effective that is if you can make a habit of it. Then what you might need to do, if this is new to you, so when I first learned these principles, it was kind of early 2000s. I trained as an NLP practitioner. And what they shared with us was that when you start to make these changes, it's not always easy to make it stick. So what we did is, there was a group of us went through this program. What we did was we set up a series of what we call positive triggers. So I had alarms on my phone that would remind me set number of times during the day to stay positive, keep seeing opportunity. I had post-it notes on my on the dashboard of my car, because I was in a field-based sales management role at that point. I had reminders on my fridge at home. My wife thought I'd gone mad, and it was all, I kind of designed the environment around me so that I kept myself from falling back into default negative thinking. I didn't even realize I was doing it. I was the fish in the water, right? I didn't know I was in the water. And that was really effective at helping me to break through that default negative mindset. And it's something that I even revisit and go back to now, even today, as I'm walking through these slides, as I'm talking to you about it, it's reinforcing to me the importance of keeping this present in our thinking so that we keep ourselves positive and growing. I'm going to share one more thing with you, and then I'm going to invite you to go out into your breakout groups. And that is, I talked about the inner coach. The inner coach is all about, so moving from critic to coach, is all about the quality of the questions that we ask ourselves on an ongoing basis. So here's some ideas. This isn't an exhaustive list, but here's some ideas. So as you meet a difficult situation, you might ask yourself, rather than, God, how do I get here again? Which might be one of your default questions, right? You might say, how is this here to help? Either me or the person in front of me, right? This negative situation, how is it here to help? You might ask, okay, what do I need to learn from this? Because these questions are framed to help you think more positively in more challenging situations. You might ask, how will I use this as an opportunity? See, and these are questions you can ask your teams as well, right? If you're having difficult conversations, okay, where's the opportunity in this? Okay, what do you need to learn from this? If this was here to help you, what help is it providing? So you've got these questions that start to help you have a frame of reference as you're having conversations with people who may be slipping into default negative mindsets. Now, how do I grow from here? Well, where's the growth opportunity in this for us? What do we need to change next time so that we don't encounter this again? So these questions really help you to navigate some of those default thinking. So we are approaching the halfway point of today's session. Hope you're finding this useful and it's stimulating some thoughts for you personally and for your teams and for the people that you're dealing with. I often share that I have a couple of people, actually family members, I'm not going to say who they are, and I have been using these techniques on them for years. and sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. And they're very, very close members of my family, where when I learn these principles, I'm like, oh, I'm going to start using some of those questions. It's really interesting. Sometimes I'll ask one of these questions, so one of them is, I won't tell you, no, I'm not going to tell you, but they rant. I've got a relative who rants about everything. And so my personal challenge in those conversations is always to try and help them to see the positive in it. So I might actually say, oh, that sounds interesting. So what good came from it? What? What do you mean, Justin? So sometimes you have to nurture these things, and then I might have to ask again. Well, no, I'm interested. That was what happened, but surely something good came of it. What good came of it? And sometimes it takes a little bit of repeating the question, because for some people, they're so ingrained, the negativity is so ingrained, can't actually see through the opportunity to think positively. So we might have to press through that kind of initial surface layer with some people. Anyway, that's hopefully that sets the scene. Let me invite you into some breakout rooms. I'd love to give you the opportunity just to talk about this, to talk about it through your own perception. Where are you today? Maybe about you, maybe about your team, maybe about customers. You decide where it's most relevant for you, but just have a conversation with each other about what this means for you as a group. When you get to the room, introduce yourselves to each other, have a quick catch up, but then talk about, okay, what have you learned through this session? What might you need to do differently? And then what I'm going to do is invite you to, when you come back as a group, if in your breakout sessions, if you can discuss who will feed back, and we'll just take a bite-sized bit of feedback from each group so that we can then share that learning, because that's as valuable for us as the session itself, as the kind of content we've covered. Okay, does that sound all right? Everyone understand? Brilliant. Okay, let me open up your rooms. You're just going to be with a random group. So we've got 2 rooms of 4, 1 room of. I'll tell you what I'm going to do. Actually, I'm going to change that. Rather than 4 rooms, we're going to do 3. Yeah, we'll do 3. We'll do 3 rooms. Okay, 3 rooms of 5. That's better. Okay, so enjoy the conversation, and if you can nominate someone to feedback when we come back, and we'll take your kind of insights, and then we'll wrap up before 2. Enjoy the conversation. I look forward to hearing your thoughts. Back. We just hit the record button again. So I'd love to hear what did you discuss? What came up for you? So room 1 was Rachel, Simon, and Dorcas. What did you discuss in your group?
So for us, it was about positivity, and for myself as a leader, that if you're not positive as a leader, then that negativity runs through your team, and it's about finding solutions. So I was just saying, like in the morning, I have a little morning huddle with my team so that any negativity, we can deal with it straight away. And it might be like some of my staff have got young children and they haven't slept the night. So how do I deal with that? I always have chocolate brownies at the hand with a coffee. So, and it's about looking for solutions to the negativity. And another thing that we're saying, that we try to be positive most of the time, but we know that sometimes that positivity isn't going to give us the end result. But it's better to be positive than negative, and know the realism, be realistic. And if you don't try something, you might be worried about something, but if you don't try it, is it better to try than have the regret? So those are the things that we were looking at. And it's so important. You must, as a leader, you must have that mindset. But then as a leader myself, it gets tiring. Sometimes I feel tired because I'm constantly looking for solutions of other people's negativity. Because that can affect your customers, my patients. So as a leader, it is quite hard having that constant mindset. So you have to work on yourself, because if you don't work on yourself, then nobody else is going to work on their self.
That's absolutely right. I love that. Thanks, Rachel. That's really insightful. Really insightful. Thank you for sharing that. There's a book called The Happiness Experiment by a guy called Sean Aker. I don't know if anybody's read it. but there's some kind of research that he shares in that book, and it's a really interesting statistic that people who approach challenges or problems with a positive mindset versus a negative mindset are 31% more productive and effective at overcoming them. So it's not just your mindset helps you to think better about it, you actually get better performance and results as an outcome of approaching things in a positive way. So you're absolutely on the right track, Rachel. Yeah, brilliant. And as a leader, it's so important that you are. That's great. Thank you. Good. Thanks, Rachel, and Group One. That sounds excellent. Room 2 was Andrew, Kevin, and Nadine.
Yes, we lost 2 people whilst you were transferring us into the group. But that was fine. We had an interesting group. Kevin, who's in the group, is now working independently after credit. So we will have a conversation probably after this. Andrew worked within the pharmaceutical kind of industry of doing clinical trials. So again, similar work. And our conversation was really all about having that positive mindset with our customers. And in terms of what Rachel kind of like alluded to earlier, it's about finding solutions. We can all walk away from a conversation, and sometimes you have to, but majority of the time you're having that conversation is because there's a problem, and the customer has got this kind of negative kind of mindset. Our jobs as individuals is to have that positive, and that's what I like to do with my customers, is to try finding a solution. And I just gave an example of a conversation I was having prior to coming on to here, where I could have kind of walked away from a good customer of mine who was requiring something, but realistically I couldn't do what he was asking for. But then I would have lost out on a major kind of deal. And alternatively, I provided a solution, what we do for another customer, and we can add parts of what he is requiring, and I will do it as complimentary, simply because of the amount of money he actually spends with us at the moment. And what turned out to be kind of a bit negativity from the emails that were going back and forth prior, he was thanking me and was really complimentary. So it was, I think we do it indirectly. We can learn new things. And this is the reason why I guess we're all on here today. So it's turning something into a positive solution. It's all about solutions.
Yeah, you're right, Nadine. Sometimes people need leadership in that conversation because they can't see the positive outcome for themselves. That's what, leadership doesn't mean always leading a team or leading a business. Sometimes it's about thought leadership. It's about ideas leadership. It's about positivity leadership, just kind of giving people that path or that vision for themselves that they can't see without your support and help. Very good. Yeah, thanks, Nadine. Excellent. Room 3 was Alan, Ian, Leanne, and Rita. Did you decide who would feedback for us?
No, we didn't.
Well volunteered, Ian.
But it looks like I've volunteered. Apologies if there's any background noise, but well, I suppose I mean, Leanne, from I suppose your perspective, it was quite interesting to focus on listening to your talking through the triggers just in. That I think resonated the most. So that was really quite interesting. And I think for I suppose for Elaine, it was that kind of becoming your own coach, the kind of, and those positive questions, more powerful questions, were really quite important. And I love the example that Rita gave of how to translate a negative, so i.e. being stuck in traffic jams for long times, into an opportunity to listen to audiobooks, which otherwise he won't have the time for, which is a brilliant way of translating. I think really a kind of challenge to a positive opportunity for me, which I've certainly made a note of and noted down the app name Audible to kind of download biz books for when I've got my long commute. So
Yeah.
so that was, I think, the kind of input so far. Without repeating material from the last session, but I got a chat. Which since I last talked, I've got an even more interesting challenge in that. I mean, just to recap, the business context was tough last year, extremely tough. We weren't doing pay reviews and bonuses consequently, so a lot of negativity in the team already. People leaving the business, and we're also talking this year of increasing radically sales targets and changing commission plans for the sales team. So a lovely concoction. And then on Friday, I found out I was actually transitioning also to a new role.
Wow.
You know, in the midst of this, which will be managed carefully, and it's good, you know, ultimately for the business and probably for myself. But it was handling that whilst at the same time trying to kind of contain everything else. And fascinating, I tried to use some of your positive tips in one of my management meetings last week, and it didn't go according to plan, and ended up being a negative feedback fest where everybody was giving me a really hard time at the end, which was fantastic. So there's certainly room for improvement. So it's been I'd say if I, you know, it's listening to your inputs, just, and I think but you know, I mean, you know, understanding that you're transitioning on Friday and then over the weekend have to kind of mentally think about, you know, what does this mean? And in the context where you've got huge questions about whatever to do with the company, you know, is whilst at the same time trying to think of the team and the business overall. So trying to keep that all in balance is and keep on smiling as well. So it's been a fun time. Yeah, but certainly I'm just thinking the growth coach, your growth coach and positivity and triggers are the things that I'm absolutely, you know, asking better questions, really thinking about that as well. And interesting enough, a side example, sorry for going on here, but I've got a client call tomorrow where I'm dealing with a problem. So I'm actually summarizing I've had to do some, let's say, interviews internally as to what went wrong, and I was summarizing feedback to the client and apologizing, obviously groveling in a way, but then also saying this is what I think is a fair outcome.
Yeah.
But I think, listen to your approach. Maybe one way can actually get the meeting off to a better start is to maybe ask her what her or her team did last year that was fantastic. You know, maybe just use a trick there to kind of get the kind of framing of the meeting to a slightly more positive side. So there you go. That's a learning impact immediately that I can deploy tomorrow.
Excellent. Thank you, Ian. Well done. That great summary. And I know exactly what you're going through. And it's bloody difficult.
Yeah.
That when you are in a leadership position, you're trying to meet the needs of the business, the needs of your teams, the needs of customers, your own personal needs. And what tends to happen is your personal needs tend to slide down that.
At the bottom. Yeah, at the bottom. Yeah.
And it's hard. It's really hard. So I sense your situation. I've been there a few times myself in the past. It's not easy. So kudos to you for staying positive, for being here in this session as well. Hopefully this is useful for you.
Yeah, definitely.
Thanks, Ian. Thanks, everyone. Thank you so much for engaging in the conversations. I hope you've all found this session useful today. Final thing from me, I've just put in the chat. There's a link here to a 45-minute coaching session. A lot of people take me up on this each week, so thank you to those of you who have so far. This is an opportunity to, if you are after, we talked about some topics today, we talk about topics each week in these workshops. If you're after some kind of more specific, tailored advice, you'd like just a coaching session. I don't know if any of you have worked with a coach before. But the reason I became a coach is because I was working with a coach and it was incredibly effective. Sometimes you just need someone to ask you some questions that are different from the questions you're asking yourself. And that's half the battle. So if anybody would like to take me up on that, it's a complimentary session. Rita did so. I spoke to Rita this morning. So thank you for booking yours, Rita. That was a really good conversation this morning. One that we will continue on as well, because we left some unanswered questions, which is always a good thing. But if you'd like to, just click that link. It will give you direct access to my diary. You can put a 45-minute session in. Ian, based on what you've talked about today, it might be useful for you. I'll very happily grab a 45-minute session, talk about your situation. I probably won't offer you any advice. I'll just coach. So it will just be an opportunity just to get you thinking differently and ask you questions. But if anybody would like to take me up on that, please feel free to do so. It's a pleasure. I really enjoy doing them. And who knows, it hopefully gives you value. And if there's something beyond that, then great. If not, great opportunity for this community to enhance beyond today anyway. So final thing, have a think about your outcomes for today. Lots of really good insights from our group discussions and feedback from the people that spoke. So thank you for everybody who gave feedback. Just have a think, what will you do differently? So what do you now need to enhance or improve as a result of today's session? That's the question I want to leave you thinking, because it's really going to help you and help your teams. So thank you, everybody. Have a wonderful rest of your Thursday. We've got one day left and then it's the weekend. Hurrah. Have a wonderful rest of the week. Have an even better weekend. And our next workshop is next Friday morning at 9 AM. So if you'd like to join us, I'll send details through to you all. Look forward to hopefully catching up with you next week as well. Have a great few days, everybody, and hopefully see you next week. Take care, everyone. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Justin.
Thank you.
Pleasure.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank
Take
you.
care. Thanks. Bye.